violence has been occurring in the protests, the riots, what people are calling free speech and beating up old folks, waving flags. We have a special guest here, and his name is Chris Parkinson, and he's a specialist in executive protection, martial arts. He's been at Ferguson. He can tell you a little bit about the happenings of a riot, what to do if you get caught up in one, and all that good stuff. Good morning, Chris. How are you?
Good morning. Very good.
Glad to have you. And number one, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, after doing several master's degrees, working toward ministry, I decided not to be a minister and do other forms of public service. Went into the Border Patrol, McAllen sector down here. And after a time with that, I decided to go corporate security. I worked for Sony, Panasonic, mainly in Mexico, protecting executives, and then a couple others, Gateway Computers, Mary Kay. And finally, I decided to go off on my own, have my own bodyguard company, did worldwide protection of mainly corporate people, some state representatives, and people like that, and some royals, like from Saudi Arabia. And recently, I have retired. Some of my more known, perhaps, jobs were as Chief of Security for the Unified Area Command at the Deepwater Horizon BP oil spill. Had several hundred people working under me as managers at all the specific sites. Other than that, I was at Ferguson, for sure. And I've done all kinds of downsizings, Yahoo, all the big corporate downsizings, tons of strikes. I worked in Iraq for the Strategic Communications Group under Paul Bremer. Wherever Paul Bremer went, we went, and so on. So those are highlights.
Very interesting. And we've talked about this for the last nine months or so. And what we see is we've always communicated about the dangers that are out there. We've seen a couple of groups that all of a sudden became very violent. One of them, Black Lives Matter, in the last 8 years or so. They started off in Florida, then all of a sudden you saw them in Ferguson, then you saw them in Baltimore, and now you're seeing them at the protests, and you're seeing at the rallies, and you just saw them at Charlottesville 2 weeks ago. And you see another group that developed, and that group is called Antifa.
Yes. And
many folks in the world do not understand what they are. And I'm going to give you my opinion of what I've seen and what I've researched. It is everybody calls Antifa white supremacist, and it's not white supremacist, because you have folks of different races and different ethnic groups within the Antifa movement. But I think folks in the media are now leaning to a right-wing conspiracy, all Republicans or a hateful group. Now that's what you're seeing. They're especially right after Charlottesville. What's your intake on that?
Well, first off, nothing happens in Washington that isn't first pre-planned. All right, that there are deep thinkers and big think tanks that are well funded, and you think something just hits history, and it doesn't. It's been well planned for a long time. This specific, you could smell it coming over in Charlottesville. The police did not react. They did not separate anybody. So they wanted violence. They then shut down the legal people that were perhaps not our favorite people. They were Nazis and white supremacists, but they shut them down, said that you got to leave, and these guys say, well, open your ranks so we can leave this way. We don't have to go through the gauntlet. They said, no, you're going through the gauntlet, and they didn't protect them, and that's where most of the fighting happened. So these things are pre-planned, and Antifa was sitting there, not invited, and caused the ruckus, started the fights, and then the people that had the right to protest and were told, you got to go home, we're not going to honor the permit, had to go through the gauntlet and fight their way to their cars. This is crazy.
No, yeah, you're absolutely correct. And in seeing that, you have a couple of things that occur in riots, and when you protect people, whether it's in a stadium or whether you protect them in a bar or where you protect them in a crowd, there's something we all call a frenzy. Once a frenzy starts, and I've seen some of the videos there, you just basically, in my opinion, you have to clear and be more safe, get in a secure location, neutralize that, and take care of business. And what you're seeing in the frenzy, you're seeing folks that are hitting their own guys. You know, you have Antifa guys beating up Antifa guys. You have KKK guys beating up the Nazis. You just had a confusion there. Everybody was just striking each other. Where do you see that? Where else have you seen that?
If you're not wearing a uniform, first off, what are you trying to decide? By your haircut? You know, one Antifa guy hits another Antifa guy because he had what? A shaved head, and he had some tattoos on his face. Well, you know, this is crazy. They don't have a plan, and this is the problem of security. If you're caught in one of these mob bum rushes, you might get hit with feces in a balloon. You might get hit with a Coke can that's filled with cement. You might get hit with forms of liquid that act like acid and tear away at your eyeballs and your face. This is dangerous stuff these days.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And many say, well, you know, it was spawned by the Republicans, or spawned by the Democrats. We all know BLM came out of the Democratic Party. Antifa the same way. The Nazis, the skinheads, which I'll claim the skinheads, they're in the party by themselves. And the KKK is the same thing. But over the years, being spawned out of one thing and going off into your own illusion and going into your own kind of world, that's a total different entity, you know. And now the Antifa party, that's where it started in Germany, correct?
Sure, 1930s, you can see it very clear. This simply was a case of the Free Corps versus the International Bolsheviks. That's to put it as simply as possible. If you remember back in the 1930s, everybody in America was progressive. In fact, I forget who sang the song "You're the Top." Back then, there was a verse when it first came out: "You're the Mussolini, you're the great Houdini, you're the top." They took that out. The progressives, after finding out who Hitler really was after the war, or during the war, they started changing the history and trying to make Nazism like it's a right-wing thing. Well, you know, if you're a Bolshevik, Nazis are to the right, but they're not conservative. They're not traditional. They're both socialist. National socialism. Bernie is a national socialist. He's not a global socialist. He's a national socialist. National socialism is fighting the great global one world order government that's going to be socialist. This is supposed to come out in Agenda 2030. And you think that's conspiracy theory? Last year when the Pope came to the United States, they developed Agenda 2030 right there in New York. That's a United Nations agenda. And they want to push this through, and America has to fall for it to happen. America has to get weak enough that the United Nations can come in and take over. Same thing as Europe. So you're going to find Antifa in Europe. You're going to find Black Lives Matter in Europe. These are the push toys, the wind-up toys, just like at Kent State. All right. 4 died in Ohio at Kent State. What? The SDS winds up all the kids. They're all out there rioting. The National Guard comes in. Then some SDS guy shoots a gun into the ground. And then what happens? The National Guard starts shooting students. That's how you create chaos.
No, and you see, yeah, your point is, your rationale is well taken. And I see it in the other sense. You know, I'm seeing it as a security, as a protection. What can one do? You know, you have your uncle that all of a sudden, guess what? He was a proud veteran. We're going forward now. I want to wave my American flag, and he goes out there and, you know what, here comes the president. I don't want that statue taken out. And he goes out there and protests something to that thing. All of a sudden, you have these young guys beating up old men, women flying flags, and there's no respect whatsoever. Mm-hmm. And when you start looking at, then that's when I started paying attention. You know, first of all, when Antifa really moved up, this modern Antifa, I'm not talking about the ones in the 30s, this modern Antifa that's there, is I saw it right after Bernie lost. As soon as Bernie lost, you saw him go right after Hillary.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And you saw that riot going after that. Then they went after Trump. Then you had Berkeley. Then everybody was like, oh, they're just protesting. Well, listen, I believe in free speech.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that everybody has a right to base their opinion.
Yes.
And if you want to voice it in the public, you can. We have the right for free assembly. But when you go into a violent structure, then you're disrupting peace. Then you don't have that freedom anymore.
Yes.
You know, the police have to come in there and calm it down or take control of it.
Yes.
And what I have seen in video after video, the police are not taking care of the Antifa movement. But if somebody is pro-Trump at this area and all of a sudden does something, he's the one that gets arrested and takes inside. Now, in the last couple of days, I have seen a lot more news clippings on police going after Antifa guys. Okay, we would put them that way. And all hate groups alike. I hate them all. You know, screw them bastards. You know, including the Poindexter Tiki fighters that went out there and, you know, did that damage. Those guys, listen. The instant you go out there shooting hate, it's a negative. Period. Okay.
I think every conservative that I know agrees with you on that. That, you know, we're about getting jobs, having freedoms, having small government, and freedom for small business to accomplish whatever energy you want to put into your business. Color doesn't matter to the president or to you and me, but somebody's making it about color. And that's, if you follow who's making it about color, if you follow who's financing this operation, you're going to find out where the head is. Cut the head off, and everything else starts to fall apart. Now, here's the issue, because you're talking about the modern, what's about to happen. Look, Antifa and BLM, they're much more narcissistic than were the Black Panthers in the 1960s or the SDS. They are going to argue with themselves and fight among themselves. The only thing that's really going to hold them together is Soros funding. And if you can stop that kind of funding, or the big corporations, Ford Foundation funding, if you can cut that off, they'll fall apart. I don't think it's easy to cut that off. So what do we expect today? I expect a neo-feudalism. Don't think this is just going to happen like at Berkeley at the next big event, where it's going to be a freedom event. As they're planning already to disrupt that. That's not the only place it's going to be. You're going to be driving your car, and because of your haircut, you get out of the car and somebody knifes you in the throat. This has already happened last week. Somebody tried to knife a guy in the throat, got his hand, and all he did was have a high-shaved haircut. And you know what? The guy is not a neo-Nazi, but he looked like one to some Antifa crazy man. So, yeah, we're going to have to escort, the people that can't defend themselves as sheepdogs. You and I, we're sheepdogs. You and I know it. And it's time to start protecting the statues and protecting our loved ones and our community. Now, I'd say one more thing. There is a method of doing that, and there's a lot of wrong ways to do it. And maybe at some point we can talk about that.
Sure. What I've seen, especially with these protesters coming in there, a lot of them, especially Antifa, have been soliciting martial art instructors. And, you know, martial art instructors, many of them are very egoistic. Everybody's correct. You can't correct them. Many do not want to learn. We all know that. We've seen them. We know friends. We have colleagues that way. And I have seen flyers, especially in the West Coast, Los Angeles area, San Francisco area, Seattle area, of them looking for specific arts. Okay, and here's something that I'm going to show as an experience that I had when I had just returned from France back in '93, and I was invited to my first seminar to go teach. You know, I'd already done some workshops and so on and so forth, and it was in Baltimore, Maryland. As soon as I got off the plane in Baltimore, Maryland, what people call nowadays neo-Nazis, we call them skinheads. To me, they're the same thing. And when I walked in there, and the first thing I saw in that gym was was the Nazi flag, swastika, and everybody was wearing Doc Martens, camo pants, and I taught the class. Later on in time, I remember I was at the ranch and I was flicking the TV channel on. It was raining outside, and my father was there, and I see this guy that was the instructor on a documentary, and the documentary was White Supremacy in the United States. This was a headquarters. Well, the skinheads, the Nazis train, and they've been training in martial arts for a very long time. You know that. The KKK has been militarized for a very long time. And I'm not talking about the good old boys that have guns. I'm talking about the KKK. Not only have they done combatives, they've trained for decades. Okay. Here comes this new groups of Antifa and Black Lives Matter. And they're just getting into it. And they go into Charlottesville. And they're picking fights with guys that have been training for that. And what happened there was 4 hate groups showed up, and 2 hate groups got their ass kicked.
I agree. Totally.
And that was Antifa and Black Lives Matter. They went up against the other 2 groups that have been doing it for much longer, and so on and so forth. But the point of this is Antifa has been soliciting martial training and combatives for the last 10 months.
Yes, they have, yeah. Let's get something straight, though. There's only one place to truly learn combatives, and that's the United States Marine Corps. They know how to close with and destroy.
Of course.
Better than anybody else.
Of course.
In this whole world. So you get veterans coming out against these guys that have 1 or 2 years of martial arts. They don't even know what the doctrine of battle was before they're getting knocked to the ground.
I understand. And that's what we're going to see. I think that in the next couple of riots, if they're not quashed right away, like what happened in Phoenix, you're going to see a little bit more of bloodshed. And to me, I place the blame on Charlottesville, on the mayor, the governor, and the police force for not standing up. Now, there's 2 events that occurred simultaneously, and they all dealt with Confederate statues. One was in San Antonio, and the other one was in Charlottesville. You had 2 instigator groups, same ones, Black Lives Matter and Antifa, on both cities. The difference here are 2. In Charlottesville, the police were told to stand down, and the Antifa and Black Lives Matter groups went up against the skinheads, which are the Nazis, and the KKK, and they got their ass whipped. Now, in San Antonio, you have Black Lives Matter and Antifa instigating, but the police and the sheriff's department stood steadfast and quashed the situation right then and there. Another thing that we did not have in San Antonio, we did not have the KKK, and we did not have the skinheads, which here in Texas, you have some Klan members, you have some skinheads running around, but it's not really the ones that you see in the East Coast or in the West Coast. So to my opinion, in my opinion, for whatever it's worth, is that those groups have now been activated. So you're going to see a little bit more violence if it is not quashed now.
I agree. Let's look at 3 more incidents that happened after that.
Okay.
The very first next day was Durham. In Durham, a bunch of, quote, Antifa that are BLM also went over and tore down a statue. The sheriffs watched them, and we were all getting upset. Is this going to be another Charlottesville? And we said, you know what? If those sheriffs don't arrest somebody, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to go to the DA myself and complain about this, because I'll make a citizen's arrest and give it to the DA and force it on him, or force his ass out of his job. Now, luckily the next day, and I was talking to a bunch of ex-Marines about that, and they were all MARSOC types, and they were saying, yeah, you know, and they're going to back me up. So anyway, I turned around and I watched the next day. The sheriffs didn't do anything to prevent another riot, but then they quietly went and arrested everybody. I love that. because you're seeing now a conservative or middle of the road Americana like you know it coming back and say, this is too much. This is going to get out of hand. So the next thing that happens that I notice is Houston. In Houston, that you had Antifa, you had BLM, you had a lot of military presence, a police presence, and you had a lot of good old Texans with their guns and their gun rights standing there protecting the statues. Now you had a few Antifa with guns too. But you see, when you up the ante to guns, it becomes a very polite society. The first man that shoots, he might get killed himself. It's one thing to hit somebody over the head with a bludgeon. It's another thing to start shooting weapons. And nobody got shot and nobody got hit. And I call that a fair game right there. Everybody got to go out with their free speech and say what they wanted to say, and we had peace. The next thing that happened was the Trump rally in Phoenix. They thought that they would gain some ground now, and they're losing ground. Because Trump's getting more popular after Charlottesville, not less popular. And the people are backing him up in Phoenix. So they're going to start trying to punch people out and stuff like that while they leave the Trump rally. The police were all on top of it. Nothing was going to happen to those folks. These people have lost several battles since Charlottesville. And Charlottesville was prearranged.
And number one, I want peace in the United States. I want our country to be back the way it is, where everybody has the rights, okay? If you do not like something and you want to voice your opinion, feel free. Do it the correct way. The instant you start hitting somebody else, hey, that's a different
That's
story.
illegal. We need
story.
order and law.
Yeah,
and
exactly
order
right.
has to come before law. You can't enforce law without order first. Texas Rangers knew that. Down here in the wilderness Rangers had to be the law before they could enforce the law. They had to, yeah.
So this is what, if anybody has any questions, please feel free. I'm looking right here, and we've got a couple of comments. But my main thing is here. You were in Ferguson. What did you see in Ferguson?
Well, I responded because a business group had one of their storefronts windows bashed in the day before, and they had torn up the Walmart and other places. We had to respond within a day and protect 4 different locations. One was within a half a mile of ground zero. I would walk through the crowds every night as the program manager collecting intelligence, while my teams, which were mainly made of veterans from special forces types, were covering the grounds of the locations we were to protect. There was more violence against the cops than on that. Everywhere on the highways, cops were getting shot at as they were driving on the highways. They would often come to our location because we had our area so covered they could take a rest. We were given a radio, so we heard everything, police radio. We were given everything to keep ourselves in tune too. And what I saw was that the Bloods, which is a gang, was running the show. You had new Black Panther Party out there. You had a whole lot of white people, and I assumed that was the beginnings again of Antifa. It was certainly the beginnings of Black Lives Matter. The thing was built on a lie. You could tell right off the bat. You just look at the shot pattern that Wilson had to shoot, and you say, oh man, this guy was pushed back, half knocked out. His feet are probably on the concrete and his back's over the seat in his car, and he's drawing his weapon half conscious, and he crosses across his body and shoots to the right side without sights. That's about the easiest thing you can see from that shot pattern. There was no hands up, and there was no assassination there. That man was fighting for his life. But what do? They create a story out of it. It was already a prearranged story, and what was the purpose of it is the question. They wanted to show that police departments by nature are racist and ineffective, and we need a national police. That's what was there, and that's what happened in Baltimore as well.
No, absolutely. I agree with that. Here, I'm going to look at a couple of questions. Number one of them is, would these conflicts be happening if there was a different president? No. We saw the riots occur under the other administration, and they were allowed to occur. Here's something that people are forgetting. When our past president was in there, immediately you had something called a knockout game. Okay, these were kids, especially urban black kids, running around, hitting old folks, women, children. Usually they were preying on them. They'll leave the grocery store and they'll come up behind them and they'll cold cock them, pop them down and put it on video and put it up. First thing our past administration said were these kids are oppressed and they're releasing their angers. No, until one of the kids got shot in Missouri. An old lady ended up they had a concealed handgun, and all of a sudden, bingo, you're out. It was either Missouri or Missouri. And so those issues gave way to, if I can get away with this, what else can I get away with? And it just starts escalating. So we had the riots in Ferguson and Baltimore and in Florida as well. And to me, those riots were a stepping stone to what we are having now. Is the police going to do something? How far is the police going to protect? Stuff like that. And when you start getting ballsy, you start growing a pair of testicles because of something that is fiction, we have the problem here, you know, and this is it. And this problem is now in our hands. And let's say we go into a rally, or all of a sudden we're driving down the street and we take the wrong turn and we end up in the middle of one of these riots. What would you do? What would you suggest?
Well, this is interesting because there was a kid that ended up trying to leave. He's from Ohio. He's trying to leave, and here's a whole bunch of people blocking the road. All right. He slows down. He's going 10 miles an hour or less. And then some guy, it's interesting, it's a sea of white, and they're calling it a racist hit in Charlottesville, right? Sea of white. Here he is driving down the road. He has a Bernie sticker on his car. Nobody talks about that. Okay, so now some guy, happens to be a black guy, gets a baseball bat, hits the back of the car, and what does it do? It freaks this kid out. And he storms off as fast as he can, hits another car, it injures 19 people and kills one. Guess what? This kid, we don't know his politics. Everyone's already prejudged it. But he did what, as a driver instructor in both in Iraq and in the United States and in Mexico, I've taught bodyguards how to drive. And you ask any Secret Service driver, what do you do when you got a mass of people? You never stop. I recommend going 3 to 4 miles an hour and push through the crowd. That way, people have time to get around. They won't get stuck under your wheels. You might get a window or two bashed, but don't stop. Right after Ferguson, there was a Eastern European couple that got stopped by a mass of people over in St. Louis, and there were a bunch of black kids, had hammers. The Eastern European person stopped. They're both dead.
What happened to Rodney King?
Rodney King. Well, in the Rodney King riots, you're talking about the trucker that got stopped and got killed.
Got killed.
Exactly. You don't stop. You push through as carefully as you can, but do not stop. And it's going to come out in the police interview that this kid that's being called a terrorist now. And again, I don't know if I think he was pro Bernie. I think that there's a lot of evidence that he was pro Hillary Clinton. He dropped out of the military for some reason after he signed up. But this kid was scared. And the police that interviewed him know he's scared. They have him in jail to protect him. Okay, right now. And it'll come out in the trial. There's always chaos right after an event. And in the fog of the event, every news agency wants to be the first to say something. Well, I'll ask you one question that everybody needs to be asking right now. This kid had a Facebook profile. Every political statement off that Facebook profile had been cleaned off in the first 48 hours. The kid didn't do it. He's in jail. Who did it?
Yeah.
And what were those statements being? His political opinion was on that statement. We find out who took that off, and we're getting somewhere in that investigation.
Well, no, it was a tragedy. Number one, the girl that got killed, bless her heart and bless the family. And Charlottesville, as well as the United States, has to heal up.
Yeah.
And if we do not heal up, forget it. You know, we're just going to continue spiraling down.
Yeah.
But I'm in awe right now. You know, you have folks blaming this one, blaming the other one, blaming this. I'm looking at more of a security and a safety issue.
Yeah.
Okay? Number one, you want to avoid it.
Yeah.
Secondly, if you're caught up with it, make sure you can try to get to a secure location right away. Okay? Folks say, hey, let's go protest this, protest that. I do not want to go
I don't either.
because I know myself,
Yeah.
and I just shy off and go somewhere else.
Yeah.
Okay? And the reason is number one, the statute doesn't give a shit about you. The mayor doesn't either. Neither political party does. So if something does happen to you, what for?
Violence is not a political program. It's going to sputter out. It's like a fire. They burn out, and the people remain. The best thing I can suggest when these things are happening, don't attend. Get in your prayer closet and pray. Bend the air and pray for peace. This is what all the Christians are doing when these things happen, and we will overcome, okay, the darkness and the violence that way.
Well, number one, what I say is this. May God help our country who right now at the time of need.
Yeah.
Other than that, hate groups, whether left or right or whichever they want to name them now, are hate groups, and everybody should step up and stop those hate groups. Somebody told me the other day is, you're always saying that Black Lives Matter is a Democrat party, and KKK is Democrat, came out of the Democrat party, and Antifa is coming out of the Democrat party. Well, they spawned out of it.
Mm-hmm.
They came out of it.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Now, not all Democrats are the same. Oh, you're labor, and then all of a sudden the same person comes out and goes, "Oh, you're all labeling all Muslims." Not all Muslims are the same, but I have yet to see a Muslim stand up against the terrorists, condemn it.
Mm-hmm.
I've yet.
Yeah.
I mean, you saw Hussein, the king of Jordan, stand up because they killed his cousin,
Mm-hmm.
and he went after them. But right now, where is he? He's no longer flying a jet.
Yeah.
Understand? So, Democrats, and this is what I say to Democrats, and I'll say the same thing to Republicans. Democrats, if these are your spawned out children, spank them and put them back into the closet world. Guys are gonna lose your party left and right.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's gonna break up into. It's gonna shatter. You're gonna continue losing leaders like you did with Hillary and Bernie. Okay, and the Republicans unite because we place people up there. People voted you all in, and they can vote you out.
Yeah.
And right now, that is the problem that we have in these two parties.
Yeah.
And take care of your own. Take care of the American people, number one, and that's what the president is doing, taking care of all people in America in general, Democrat and Republican. Okay, that's what he's doing.
On the tactical level about protection, I agree with you on two things that you said. Defend yourself, but find a way of escape. First off, even better, don't attend. But if it comes to you and you can't get out of it, get into it. All right. Now, how do you get into it? Here's a big secret. And in security world, not necessarily in police work all the time, but definitely in the security world, we have a 1+1 rule. You see, we have a plan and we know where we're going, and we're like a football team. We got a plan to get to the goal, but the bad guys have been surveilling us, and they know our plan. So they still have the guts to attack us. Well, this is scary stuff. They have a plan to defeat our plan. This is what happens in executive protection all the time. So if we have to deal with one person, we have to think that's the diversion. Where's the real one? 1+1 rule. Okay, we deal with the guy on our flank now. There were two. We deal with him. We think, oh, that's the diversion. Where's the real one? Always think 1+1 until the area is clear. Do never think it's a one-on-one kumite. You are going to be outnumbered because that's how they can beat your plan. And even if they haven't found what your strategy is, they're going to bum rush you with a mob. And there's always the 1+1 rule will get you out. Never think it's clear until you're completely out of the zone.
And if you have to defend, exactly, and if you do have to defend yourself, well, defend yourself. Plain and simple.
Exactly.
And defend yourself, make it as, hate to say that, make it as bloody as it comes. And why? Because many of these folks out there might think they know experience of violence, and they might be causing the violence, but only good men that can control violence are the only ones who are going to live through it. And we saw that in Benghazi, and thanks to our heroes, you know.
Men of good nature, men of virtue, can't just be goody two-shoes praying all the time. We also have to know violence and know where it leads and how to use it, but it's our virtue that keeps it in check, that we don't go slapping everybody around. We only use it when it's honestly time to use it.
And again, once more, I want to thank everybody out there watching. Stay calm, stay collective, stay out of these riots. If you have to protest something, protest it correctly, legally. Remember, the first punch thrown, it ends up into many. And comply with the police, number one. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
And
thank you.
You guys out there, keep watching. Until next time, here in Gloves.